Hi, friends. Before I say anything else, before I tell you a single story, before I share a single idea with you today, I want you to do something for me. I want you to take a breath, a real one. A real one. Not the kind you've been taking all week. The shallow, anxious, barely. The kind where your chest is tight and your mind is already 3 steps ahead of your body. No, I want you to take a real breath. Slow, deep, like you're tasting the air for the first time. Go ahead. Breathe. Good. Because what I'm about to say to you in the next hour or so, it's going to matter. And I need you present. Not half here checking your phone, thinking about what you have to do after this. I need all of you. Every single broken, tired, hopeful, scared, wonderful part of you. Because what I want to talk to you about today is not motivation. It's not a 5-step plan. It's not a productivity hack or a morning routine or a journal prompt. What I want to talk to you about today is your life. Your life. The one that's been sitting in the back of your mind, waiting. The one you've been meaning to get to. The one you keep telling yourself you'll start on Monday. The one that looks slightly different in your imagination than it does when you look in the mirror. That life. Because here's what I know. And I know this not because I read it in a book, I know this because I lived it. There comes a moment in a person's life when the gap between who they are and who they know they could be becomes too painful to ignore. It stops being a whisper. It starts being a scream. And that moment, that painful, terrifying, beautiful moment, is not a crisis, it's an invitation. And I think that's why you're here today. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in timing. And something in you, something deeper than your conscious mind, something that doesn't have a name but you've always known was there. That thing brought you here, to this moment, to these words. Because it knows you're ready, even if your mind doesn't, even if your bank account doesn't, even if your past doesn't, something in you is ready. And today we are going to talk about what it means to truly, completely, unapologetically reset your life. Not tweak it, not adjust it, not reorganize the furniture in a house that doesn't feel like home. Reset it. Let me tell you about a man named Marcus. Marcus grew up in a small apartment in a city that wasn't particularly beautiful or particularly ugly. It was just gray. His father worked nights at a warehouse. His mother worked double shifts at a diner 3 blocks away. They weren't poor in the dramatic, cinematic way that people sometimes romanticize. They were quietly poor. The kind of poor where you always have enough, but just barely. The kind of poor where new shoes are a birthday conversation, not a Tuesday. Where the heat sometimes goes off in February and nobody makes a big deal out of it. Because what's the point? Marcus grew up watching his parents work themselves to the bone. Watching them come home exhausted, sit in front of the television and fall asleep before 9 p.m. Not because they were lazy. Not because they were lazy. Because they were spent. Completely, utterly spent. And Marcus loved his parents. He loved them fiercely. But he also made a silent promise to himself around the age of 12. Standing in that small kitchen, watching his mother rub her feet at the table, eyes half closed, he made a promise that his life would be different. He was going to get out. He was going to build something. He was going to matter. And for a while it looked like he was going to keep that promise. He got decent grades. He worked part-time jobs through high school. He got a scholarship, not a full one but enough, to a state university 2 hours from home. He studied business. He hustled. He graduated business. He hustled. He graduated. He got a job. He got a better job. He got married. He bought a house. He had 2 kids. And at 34 years old, Marcus found himself sitting in his car in his own driveway at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Not wanting to go inside. Just sitting there, engine off, darkness around him. And he realized, with a kind of slow, suffocating horror, that he had absolutely no idea who he was. He had built a life, a good life by every measurable standard. But somewhere along the way, in the busyness of checking boxes and meeting expectations and being responsible, he had lost himself. He had stopped asking what he wanted. He had stopped listening to that voice inside him. He had gotten so good at being who everyone else needed him to be that he had completely forgotten what it felt like to be himself. Does that sound familiar? I'm asking you seriously. Does that sound familiar? Because I think it does. I think for a lot of you sitting here today in this room watching this, I think you know that feeling. Maybe not in those exact circumstances. Maybe you're 22 and you already feel it. Maybe you're 58 and you've been carrying it for decades. Maybe you're somewhere in between. But that feeling, that quiet, persistent, gnawing feeling that there is more to you, more to this life, more that you're supposed to be doing and experiencing and becoming. That feeling is almost universal. And what do most people do with that feeling? They suppress it. Suppress it. They drown it in Netflix. They numb it with alcohol. They bury it in business. They scroll past it on their phones. They tell themselves they're being ungrateful, that people have it worse, that this is just life, that it gets better, that they'll deal with it later, that now is not the right time, that they'll start on Monday, that things will change when the kids are older, when the job is more stable, when they have more money, when they feel more ready. When, and the years go by, and the feeling doesn't go away, it just gets heavier. Here is something I want you to understand with every cell in your body. Are you listening? Postponing your life is not the same as preparing for it. Postponing your life is not the same as preparing for it. There is a difference between being strategic and being stuck. There is a difference between patience and paralysis. And most of us, if we are honest, really honest, with the kind of honesty that comes at 2 a.m. when the distractions are gone and it's just you and the ceiling, most of us know which one we're doing. We're not preparing, we're hiding. And I say we, because I'm not standing here as someone who figured this all out easily. I'm standing here as someone who hid for a very long time, who played it safe, who stayed in the wrong job for 3 extra years because I was terrified of starting over, who stayed in a relationship that wasn't working because the idea of being alone felt worse than the certainty of being unhappy, who had a dream sitting in my chest for years and never told anyone about it, because what if I tried and failed? What would that mean? What would it mean? What would it mean about me? And that's the real fear, isn't it? It's not the failure itself. We can handle failure. Human beings are remarkably good at handling failure when it comes from outsiders. When the economy tanks, when a relationship ends, when circumstances change, we adapt. We survive. We are wired for it. The fear that paralyzes us is the failure that feels like a verdict. The failure that says, you tried to become something more and you couldn't. The failure that feels like evidence that the voice in your head was right all along. The one that said you weren't smart enough, talented enough, disciplined enough, worthy enough. That's the fear. And that fear, my friends, has stolen more lives than any disease, any war, any catastrophe in human history. Not because people died, but because they never truly lived. They went through the motions. They played the roles, they wore the masks. They said, I'm fine so many times, they started to believe it. And then one day, they looked up and the time was gone and the dream was a memory and the version of themselves they used to imagine had become a stranger. I will not let that be your story. Not today. Let me tell you about the Japanese concept of ichigai. It's a word that doesn't translate perfectly into English, which is why I love it. The closest we can get is reason for being. Your ichigai is that place at the center of 4 circles: what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And the Japanese believe that finding that center, that reason for being, is the key, not just to happiness, but to a long, healthy, meaningful life. Researchers have studied the people in Okinawa, Japan, one of the so-called blue zones where people routinely live past 100 years old. And one of the things they discovered beyond diet and exercise and community was this: these people know why they get up in the morning. They have a reason, a purpose, something that pulls them forward, something that makes life feel worth showing up for. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, that's beautiful, but I don't know my purpose. I don't know my ichigo. I don't even know where to start. That's okay. Because here's the truth about purpose that nobody tells you. You don't find your purpose by thinking about it. You find it by moving toward it, by trying things, by paying attention to what makes you lose track of time, by noticing what makes you angry. Because often what makes you angry about the world is connected to what you're here to fix. By listening to what makes your heart beat faster, even when your mind tells you it's impractical or risky or too late. And in 2026, you're going to choose a direction. But first, before we talk about where you're going, we need to talk about something uncomfortable. Something most motivational speakers skip over because it's messy and painful and doesn't fit neatly into an Instagram graphic. We need to talk about the weight you've been carrying. Not your circumstances, Not the external things that are genuinely hard. I'm talking about the internal weight. The stories you've been telling yourself, the identity you've built around your wound, the way you've let your past write the script for your future. Because here's what I know about human beings: we are meaning making machines. Something happens to us, and we make meaning out of it. We create a story, and then we live inside that story as if it's the only possible truth. Truth. A child grows up in a chaotic home and creates the story. The world is not safe. I am not safe. I must be in control at all times. And 40 years later, they're still living that story, pushing people away, leading to control every outcome, unable to rest, unable to trust, unable to let love in. A teenager gets laughed at when they raise their hand in class and creates the story. My ideas are stupid. I shouldn't speak up. Stay small and you won't get hurt. And 20 years later, they're in a meeting with a brilliant idea and they say nothing. Because the story says to stay quiet. A young person falls in love for the first time and gets their heart broken and creates the story. I'm not lovable. The people I love leave. I should protect myself. And they spend the next decade in surface level relationships, never letting anyone truly in, wondering why they feel so alone. We build these stories and then we defend them. Because the story, as painful as it is familiar. And familiar feels like safety even when it isn't. Even the familiar thing is actually a prison. This is what psychologists call the narrative self. The story of who you are that you've been constructing your whole life. And that story is made up. I say that with full love. Of a combination of your real experiences, your interpretations of those experiences, the things people told you about yourself, the conclusions you drew, the beliefs you absorbed from your family and your culture and your religion and your society. Some of those things are true, and some of them are just old. They were true once for a younger, smaller, more vulnerable version of you who needed them to survive. But you are not that person anymore. And those stories left unexamined are keeping you stuck. This is the first step in resetting your life. Not a new planner, not a new gym routine, not a new vision board. The first step, sitting down with yourself, quietly, honestly, and asking, what is the story I've been telling myself? About who I am, about what I deserve, about what's possible for me, about why things haven't worked out, about why they won't. And then asking, is that story actually true, or is it just the loudest thing I've heard? There was a study done, and I love this study, where researchers took a group of people and told them they were going to take a mathematical aptitude test. Before the test, they primed half the group by having them briefly think about something that made them feel good about themselves. A success, a value they held, something they were proud of. The other half received no such priming. The group that was briefly reminded of their own value, their own identity beyond just being a test taker, performed significantly better. Not because they were smarter, they were the same people. But because for a few minutes they had stepped outside the limiting story and touched something truer. Your identity is not fixed. Your past is not your potential. And 2026 is not just a new year. It is a blank page. And you are holding the pen. Let me tell you about a woman named Elena. Elena grew up in Eastern Europe, the daughter of a school teacher and a factory worker. She had a gift for mathematics, a real gift, the kind that made her teachers pull her parents aside and say this child is special. She dreamed of becoming an engineer, of building things, of solving problems that mattered. But her family didn't have money for university, and the scholarships were competitive. And she was young and scared, and she failed the entrance exam the first time. And instead of trying again, she listened to the voice, the one we all have, that said, you see, you weren't that special after all. And she went to secretarial school. And she got a job, and she worked at that job for 11 years. 11 years, 11 years. And then one day, at 31 years old, her daughter, 7 years old, came home from school with a math problem she was struggling with. And Elena sat down with her, and something lit up. Something that had been dark for 11 years suddenly flooded with light. And she helped her daughter, and then she looked up more problems. And then she started doing mathematics for fun. At her kitchen table after her daughter went to bed. And a year later, she was enrolled in night school. And 3 years after that, she had a degree. And 2 years after that, she was working as a structural engineer. At 36 years old, she started the career she was always meant to have. Was it easy? No. Was she tired? Constantly. Did people tell her she was crazy, that she was too old, that she should be realistic? Yes. Ah, including people who loved her. But Elena understood something that most people never learn. She understood that the cost of staying small is always higher than the cost of trying. Always. Because the cost of trying, the worst possible outcome, is that you fail and you feel embarrassed and you have to try again or try something different. That's the worst case. And it's survivable. It's more than survivable. It's data. It's information. It's a stepping stone. But the cost of not trying, the cost of spending your one singular precious life being less than what you could be, that cost is paid in something you can never get back. Time and regret and the slow, quiet grief of a life half lived. I am asking you today. No, I am begging you today. Do not let that be your story. You are sitting here in this moment with potential that the world has not yet seen, with gifts that have not yet been given, with a version of yourself that hasn't been born yet. And 2026 is the year that changes. Changes. Not someday. Not when things are more stable. Now. Now, let's talk about what it actually means to reset your life, because I don't want this to be abstract. I don't want you to leave here feeling inspired for 48 hours and then go back to the same patterns. I want this to be real. I want this to stick. A reset is not a revolution. It's not burning your life to the ground. It's not quitting your job tomorrow or moving to another country or leaving everyone who knows you. Sometimes it is those things, but most of the time, it's something much quieter and much harder. A reset is a choice, made from a different level of consciousness than the one that created your current circumstances. Albert Einstein, whether he actually said it or not, the idea is true. Someone once said that you cannot solve a problem from the same level of thinking that created it. You have to rise above it. You have to see it from a different vantage point. You have to become, even slightly, a different person than the one who created the situation you want to change. And that process of becoming, that's what a reset is. It happens in your mind before it happens in your life. Let me say that again, because it's too important to rush past. It happens in your mind before it happens in your life. Every external change begins as an internal shift. Every physical result begins as a mental cause. Ooh. Every new chapter of your story begins with a decision made in the privacy of your own consciousness, in a moment that no one else may ever see or know about. Marcus, sitting in his driveway at 11 p.m., decided something. He didn't know what he was deciding exactly. But in that dark, quiet car, he made a choice. He chose to stop performing and start living. And that choice, invisible to everyone around him, was the beginning of everything. He didn't transform overnight. It took him 2 years. 2 years of therapy, of hard conversations with his wife, of exploring what he actually loved, of making mistakes, of going back to something he had abandoned in his 20s, music. Not to become famous, not to make money, but just because it made him feel alive. 2 years of being uncomfortable and unsure, and sometimes terrified. But he didn't stop, because he had made the choice. And once you truly make that choice, the real one, not the one you tell people you've made, but the deep, cellular, this is non-negotiable one, it becomes very hard to go back to sleep. So how do you make that choice? How do you actually begin? I want to give you something practical. Not a 5-step plan with a catchy acronym. Just something real and true that has worked for human beings across centuries and cultures. You start by getting still. In a world that is louder than ever, in a world that is designed to keep your attention fractured and your mind racing, the single most radical act you can perform is to get quiet. Not forever, not in some monastery somewhere, just regularly, deliberately. Putting your phone face down and sitting with yourself, walking without headphones, driving without the radio, waking up 5 minutes earlier and sitting in the silence before the day crashes in. Because here's what happens when you get still. The real stuff rises to the surface, not the noise, not the to-do list, not the anxiety, the real stuff. The things you want, the things you fear, the things you know to be true about yourself that you've been too busy to acknowledge. Getting still is terrifying for most people. Because when you stop running, you have to feel what you've been running from. And that's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's very uncomfortable. Sometimes it brings up grief or anger or sadness that you thought you dealt with but hadn't. That's okay. Feel it. Let it move through you. Because the feelings you've been suppressing are not your enemy. They are messengers. They are data. They are your body's way of saying, hey, pay attention to this. This matters. You cannot reset your life while you are in a constant state of numbing and avoidance. You have to be willing to feel. And then once you're feeling, once you're present with yourself in that honest, uncomfortable, real way, you can start to ask the real questions. What do I actually want? Not what I think I should want. Not what I think I should want. Not what other people want for me. What do I, at my core, most deeply want from this one life I have? What have I been tolerating that I need to stop tolerating? What have I been avoiding that I need to face? What story about myself am I ready to let go of? What version of myself have I been keeping hidden because I was afraid of what people would think? And what would change if I stopped being afraid? These are not small questions. They deserve time. They deserve paper and pen. They deserve the kind of attention we usually reserve for everyone and everything except ourselves. But here's what I know, and I've seen this happen again and again and again. When people create the space to ask these questions and then sit quietly and wait for the answers instead of immediately running away from them, something shifts, something moves. Something that was locked begins to open. And it doesn't always feel good right away. Sometimes it feels like grief because recognizing what you've been missing is painful. Sometimes it feels like anger because you realize how long you've been settling. Sometimes it feels like fear because the gap between where you are and where you want to be looks impossibly wide. But beneath all of those feelings, if you sit long enough, if you're brave enough, there is something else. There is clarity. And clarity, my friends, is the most powerful force a human being can possess. When you know who you are, you stop being swayed by who people tell you to be. When you know what you want, you stop wasting time on what you don't. When you're clear about your values, every decision becomes easier because you have a compass, not a map, because maps become outdated and paths change, but a compass that always points true north. Let me talk to you for a moment about identity. Not the identity on your ID card. Not the identity you've constructed for social media. Your deep identity, the bones level answer to the question, who am I? Here's something that changed my life when I understood it. Ready? You do not behave your way into new outcomes. You become your way into them. Let me explain. Most people try to change their behavior without changing their identity. They say, I want to be healthy, and then try to force themselves to go to the gym 3 times a week, while their internal self-image still says, I am a person who doesn't work out. And they fight and strain and white-knuckle it for 2 weeks, and then they stop, because the behavior was at war with the identity. But the people who make lasting change, the ones who don't just go to the gym for 2 weeks in January, but are still going in December, in February, in year 3, those people change the story. They stopped saying, I'm trying to be healthy, and started saying, I am a healthy person. They stopped saying, I'm trying to write, and started saying, I am a writer. They stopped saying, I'm trying to build a business, and started saying, I'm an entrepreneur. The language sounds small. The difference is enormous. Because when your identity says, I am a healthy person, every choice you make is filtered through that lens. You don't have to motivate yourself to eat better or work out. You just ask, what would a healthy person do right now? And you do that. Not perfectly. Healthy people have bad days and lazy days and cheat meals, but they always return to who they are, because who they are is the compass. In 2026, I want you to decide who you are, not based on your past, not based on your circumstances, based on your choice. Decide. I am a person who keeps their word. I am a person who does hard things. I am a person who takes care of their body. I am a person who shows up for their dreams. I am a person who learns from failure. I am a person who learns from failure. I am a person who is worthy of love. I am a person who builds things that matter. Decide. Write it down. Say it out loud. Put it on your wall. And then here's the crucial part. Start making small decisions that are consistent with that identity. Not big ones at first. Small ones. Drink the water. Make the call. Make the call. Write the first paragraph. Send the email you've been putting off. Wake up 10 minutes earlier. Say no to the thing that drains you. Say yes to the thing that scares you. Each small decision is a vote for the person you're becoming, and votes accumulate, and momentum builds. And one day, and this day always comes sooner than you expect when you're consistent. You look in the mirror and you think, I actually am that person. I actually became them. Not because you had a perfect strategy, not because everything went right, but because you kept voting. Let me tell you about discipline for a moment, because I think we've gotten it all wrong. We think discipline is about willpower. We think it's about being tough and grinding and pushing through pain. And there is a place for that. Hard work is real and necessary, and I will never tell you otherwise. But true discipline, lasting discipline, is not about forcing yourself to do something you hate over and over. True discipline is about caring enough about your future self that you make choices in the present that serve them. Think about that. Your future self is a real person. They will wake up in 5 years, in 10 years, and their life will be the result of decisions that your present self is making right now. Right now. This moment, this choice. Do you love your future self? Do you care about them? Do you want to hand them a life full of possibility, health, freedom, meaning? Or are you going to hand them a pile of postponed dreams, damaged health, unfulfilling relationships, and the crushing weight of regret? Because every day you make choices that are either an investment in your future self or a withdrawal from them. And the compound interest of consistent, aligned choices is staggering. The person you can be in 5 years, if you start choosing differently today, is almost unimaginable to your current self. I have seen it happen. I have seen people in their 60s transform. I have seen people who were told they had chronic illnesses reverse their conditions through radical lifestyle change. I have seen people who spent 20 years in the wrong career find the courage to start over and build something extraordinary. I have seen people who had completely fallen apart, financially, emotionally, physically, rebuild from absolute zero. The human capacity for reinvention is not a theory. It is a documented, historical, repeatable fact. And it is available to you right now. But you have to want it more than you want comfort, more than you want validation, more than you want the familiar gray of the life you already know. And I think you do. I think that's why you're here. Let's talk about relationships, because no conversation about resetting your life is complete without it. Because the people around you are not just background characters in your story, they are architects of it. And whether you realize it or not, you are deeply shaped by the 5 or 6 people you spend the most time with. This is not about cutting people off carelessly. This is not about being cold or selfish. It is about being honest. There are people in your life who lift you higher, who see the best in you even when you can't see it yourself, who challenge you, support you, believe in you, call you on your nonsense with love. People who, when you leave their presence, you feel more like yourself, more alive, more possible. And there are people in your life who do the opposite, who, sometimes without even knowing it, sometimes with the best of intentions, shrink you, who remind you of your failures more than your potential, who are so deep in their own fear that they project it onto you, who need you to stay the same because your growth makes them uncomfortable, who drain your energy until you feel empty, who create chaos that costs you focus, time, and peace. You know who these people are. You don't need me to tell you. Something in you has known for a long time. And here's what I want to say about this very carefully, because it's delicate. Some of those people might be your family. They might be people you love deeply. And love doesn't disappear just because a relationship is unhealthy. You can love someone completely and still recognize that being close to them is not serving your growth. You can love from a distance. You can love with boundaries. You can love with boundaries. You can love while protecting your own becoming. This is not betrayal. This is wisdom, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot help anyone else build their life while yours is crumbling. You cannot be the person your community needs, your children need, your partner needs, your friends need, if you have completely abandoned yourself in the service of everyone else. Putting yourself on the list, making your own growth, your own health, your own becoming a priority is not selfish. It is responsible. It is, in fact, the most loving thing you can do for the people around you. Because when you show up as the fullest, truest, most alive version of yourself, you give everyone around you permission to do the same. Your courage is contagious. Your aliveness is a gift. Now I want to spend some time on failure, because I think this might be the most misunderstood concept in the entire personal development space. We have a very unhealthy relationship with failure in most of our cultures. We treat it as an identity marker, as evidence, as something to be hidden and ashamed of. We post our success on social media and hide our failures. We talk about our wins in job interviews and edit out the losses. We present polished, curated versions of ourselves to the world and wonder why we feel so alone. Meanwhile, every single person we admire, every single human being who has built something meaningful or changed something or contributed something lasting to this world, every single one of them has a failure story. Usually several, usually catastrophic ones. Walt Disney was told his characters lacked imagination and he had no good ideas, and he was fired from a newspaper. He went bankrupt before he built the most magical place on earth. Oprah Winfrey was told she was unfit for television. She was fired from her first TV reporting job. Fired from her first TV reporting job. She was a teenage mother from a broken home in rural Mississippi, and she became the most powerful woman in media. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Cut. Sent home, told he wasn't good enough. And then he became arguably the greatest basketball player who ever lived, J.K. Rowling, before Harry Potter changed everything, was a divorced single mother living on welfare, deeply depressed, having thoughts of suicide. She has talked about this. That was her life before one of the most successful book series in human history. Steven Spielberg was rejected by the USC School of Cinematic Arts twice. These are not footnotes. These are the story. The failure is not the interruption of the success. The failure is what made the success possible. Because failure is a teacher, and if you learn the lesson, you do not have to repeat the grade. But here's the thing about failure that most people miss. Most people take failure personally. They think I failed means I am a failure. And they fuse the experience with their identity, and then they stop trying because trying again would risk further evidence of what they already believe about themselves. This is the trap. This is how potential dies. Not in one dramatic moment, but in the slow accumulation of avoided attempts. In the I'll try again someday that becomes I'll try again when I'm more ready. That becomes that was just a phase. That becomes that's just not who I am. You are not your failures. You are not even your successes. You are the sum total of your willingness to keep showing up. Period. Every time you fall down and get back up, you are writing a story. Not just for yourself, for everyone watching you. For your children who are learning how to handle adversity from watching you handle yours. For your community who may be one step behind you and need to see it's possible. For the younger version of you who is somehow always watching, always taking notes. Get back up. Not because it's easy. It's not easy. It's not easy. Getting back up when you've been knocked down is one of the hardest things human beings do. But you have done it before. Every single one of you has done it before. You are here, which means you survived something. You survived heartbreak or poverty or illness or betrayal or loss or failure or all of the above. You are here, which means you have already proven that you have what it takes. You have already survived 100% of your hardest days. Let that sink in. Every day that you thought you couldn't get through, you did. Every moment of despair that seemed endless, ended. Every impossible situation that had no visible way out, somehow you found your way through. You are more resilient than you know. And in 2026, it is time to start trusting that. Let's talk about time, because I think we are collectively insane about how we think about it. We act as though we have endless time. We put things off. We say later. We treat our life's most important work as if it can wait indefinitely while we attend to everything urgent and everyone else. And then something happens. A diagnosis, a death, a loss, a close call. And for a brief window, we see clearly. We see that time is finite. We see that the clock is always moving. We see that the gap between who we are and who we want to be is not automatically closing. In fact, without deliberate action, it grows. And in that window, we make promises. We say this changes now. And then the window closes and the urgency fades and we go back to the familiar. I want to help you keep that window open. Not through fear, not through the anxiety of mortality, though that's real and worth sitting with, but through love. True love for this life you've been given. True love for the people whose lives will be touched by the version of you that dared to become. You have been given one life. One, not a practice run, not a simulation. This is it, right now. This is the main event. And it is simultaneously terrifying and incredibly abundantly beautiful. Think about everything that had to happen for you to be here. Every single ancestor who survived. Every moment in history that could have gone differently and would have prevented your existence. Every cosmic coincidence, every biological miracle, every choice made by every person in your lineage that led eventually to you. You are not an accident. You are the result of billions of years of relentless, improbable survival. And you have been given, not earned, given consciousness, the ability to dream, to imagine, to create, to choose, to love, to build, to change. What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? I want to spend some time on the practice of courage because courage is not what most people think it is. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is not the soldier who feels no fear in battle. That person, if they exist, is probably missing something. Real courage is the person who is absolutely terrified and moves forward anyway, who feels the shaking in their hands and dials the number, who feels the tightening in their chest and hits publish, who feels the wave of doubt and says their piece anyway. Courage is action in the presence of fear. And here's the beautiful thing about courage, it compounds. Every time you do the courageous thing, no matter how small, you expand your capacity for it. You train the muscle. You prove to your nervous system that doing scary things doesn't kill you, and in fact, often leads to something extraordinary. And slowly, over time, the things that used to terrify you become just challenging. And the things that used to be your ceiling become your flow. But you have to start. You have to take the first courageous action, even when you don't feel ready, especially when you don't feel ready. Because here's the truth I need to give you, and I need you to hear it all the way down to your bones. Readiness is a myth. You will never feel ready. Not for the conversation you've been avoiding. Not for the business you've been meaning to start. Not for the creative work you've been storing up inside you. Not for the difficult change you know needs to happen. The people who wait until they feel ready die waiting. The people who change their lives are the ones who decide to act and feel the readiness build in the doing. It's built through action, not before it. You don't build confidence and then take the leap. You take the leap and then build confidence. That's the order. That's always been the order. And I know this is scary. I know the idea of acting before you feel ready feels reckless. But let me ask you something. What has waiting gotten you? What has being careful and strategic and risk-averse and ready brought into your life? More of the same. A life that's comfortable, but not quite right. Stability that feels like a cage with a velvet lining. I'm not asking you to be reckless. I'm asking you to be brave. There is a difference. A reckless person jumps off a cliff without looking. A brave person stands at the edge of the cliff, sees how far it is, feels every cell of fear in their body, and jumps anyway because they know. They know that the view from the bottom of the wrong jump is still better than the view from the top of a life unlived. Now let me talk about what happens after you decide. Because this is where most people struggle. Not the decision, the follow-through. The showing up on Wednesday when the inspiration has faded. The continuing in February when January's fire has dimmed. The persisting when the results aren't yet visible. This is where character is built or broken. Because the world is full of people who start. The world is not full of people who continue. And continuing, faithful, unglamorous, day by day continuing, is the entire secret. That's it. That's the big revelation. Keep going. That's the whole answer. Not sprint and crash and burn and start over. Not the dramatic gesture followed by collapse. Just steady daily committed action in the direction of who you're becoming. The compound interest of effort works exactly like financial compound interest. The early results are invisible. You're doing the work and nothing seems to be changing, and you feel like you're wasting your time, and everyone around you seems to be further along, and the doubt gets loud. This is the critical period. This is where everything is decided. The people who quit here in this invisible period before the results emerge, they never get to see what was being built. They stop just before the breakthrough. They plant the seed and leave before the harvest. The people who stay, who are faithful to the invisible work, who keep taking the small daily actions even when nothing seems to be happening, those people step into the exponential phase, where everything that was building underground suddenly shoots up into the light, where years of quiet work compound into what looks to everyone else like an overnight success. There are no overnight success. There are only people who did the invisible work long enough to reach the visible payoff. And you can be one of those people. You can be one of those people. But you have to commit to the long game. Not the shortcut, not the life hack, not the 30-day transformation, the long game. The one that requires consistency and patience and the willingness to look foolish and perfect and unfinished for a while. The caterpillar does not transform in a moment. It literally dissolves. Its body breaks down completely inside the chrysalis, becomes something almost formless, unrecognizable, before it becomes the butterfly. The process is not pretty. It is not comfortable. It is not something you could look at from the outside and see the butterfly coming. But the butterfly is always coming if you don't stop. I want to talk to you about grief for a moment because resetting your life is not only about excitement and possibility. There is grief in it too. And I think we do people a disservice when we skip over that. When you decide to become more, you are also letting go of something. An old version of yourself, an old way of seeing, old relationships that may not fit who you're becoming. Old dreams that you finally admit were never really yours. They were someone else's expectations, someone else's definition of success. Old habits that felt like comfort even when they were killing you. Letting go of these things, even when they aren't serving you, even when you know they need to go, is a kind of grief. And grief deserves to be honored. Don't rush through it. Don't bypass it. Don't post about your transformation before you've fully metabolized it. Give yourself permission to mourn the old self, to say that version of me did their best. They were doing the only things they knew how to do with the resources they had. I am not betraying them by growing. I am fulfilling them. I am giving them what they always wanted, to see me truly alive. Wanted to see me truly alive. And then with tenderness for the old self and excitement for the new, you walk forward. Let me talk about the power of vision. Not just goal setting, not just the tactical planning that life coaches love to teach, but true, immersive sensory emotional vision. The kind that makes your heart race when you imagine it. The kind that's so real in your mind's eye that you can feel it, taste it, smell it. There is research, neuroscience research, showing that the brain cannot easily distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you imagine something with full sensory detail, your brain activates many of the same neural pathways as if it were actually happening. This is not woo, this is neurology. Athletes have known this for decades. Elite performers in every field use visualization not as a supplement to practice, but as an essential form of it. They mentally rehearse the perfect performance so many times that when the real moment comes, it is familiar. The neural groove is already worn. So what does your life look like if it goes right? Not the incremental improvement version, the version where you show up fully and do the thing and become who you're meant to be. What does your morning feel like? What kind of work are you doing? Who are the people around you? What does your body feel like? What does your spirit feel like? Get specific, get sensory, get emotional, and then visit that vision regularly. Not obsessively, not as escapism, but as a compass, as a reminder of where you're going. As a way of letting your brain begin to build the neural pathways that make the vision familiar before you get there. Because your brain wants the familiar. Give it the right thing to get familiar with. I want to circle back to something I said near the beginning, because I think it's worth going deeper on. I said that this year is your invitation, and I meant it. But here's what I've come to understand about invitations. You have to RSVP. An invitation without a response is just a piece of paper. Or in this case, it's just an hour of inspiration that fades by the time you get home and the kids are yelling and dinner isn't made and work is calling and the old pattern pulls you back like gravity. You have to RSVP. You have to make the choice and then make it again tomorrow and then again the day after. And the way you RSVP to this particular invitation is through action. Small, concrete, specific action that happens not when you feel inspired but on a schedule. On a schedule. Because inspiration is a visitor. Discipline is a resident. Here's what I want you to do, and I mean this completely literally. Within 24 hours of hearing these words, I want you to identify one concrete action that is aligned with the life you want to build. One action, not a plan. Not a list, one action. Maybe it's signing up for the class you've been putting off. Maybe it's making the doctor's appointment you've been avoiding. Maybe it's writing the first sentence of the thing you keep saying you're going to write. Maybe it's having the conversation you've been dreading. Maybe it's deleting the app that's been eating your attention. Maybe it's calling the person you've been meaning to call. Maybe it's looking in the mirror and saying for the first time without embarrassment, I am worth this. Because the decision that isn't followed by action within 24 hours has a very high probability of dying. The window closes, the courage fades, the old neural pathways reassert themselves, and you go back to who you were. But an action, even a tiny one, changes something. It creates a new data point. It tells your nervous system, we are doing something different now. And the next action is slightly easier. And the one after that slightly easier still. And before you know it, you have momentum. And momentum is the difference between a life that's in motion and a life that's at rest. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Physics, applied to personal transformation. You just have to get in motion. Let me talk to you about the people who love you. There are people in your life, maybe one person, maybe several, who have been watching you, who have seen your potential from further away than you can see it yourself, who have ached for you quietly, wanting to tell you but not knowing how that you are more than you've been allowing yourself to be, that you are magnificent and wasted, and there is so much more, who have seen the greatness in you that you've hidden or minimized or been too afraid to claim. Live for them, not because you owe them your life, but because the love of people who truly see us is one of the most powerful forces for transformation there is. And more than that, live for the people who will one day tell their own story of transformation and say, I saw what was possible because I watched you. I believed it was possible because you proved it. You changed my life by changing yours. You cannot always see the ripples you make, but they are real. Every life that steps into its fullness makes the world more of what it's meant to be. Every person who answers the call to grow and become and show up makes it slightly easier for everyone around them to do the same. Your becoming is not a private act. It is a gift to the world. We are approaching the end of our time together, and I feel an urgency to give you the thing that I think matters most. Not a tactic or a tool, but a mindset. The underlying orientation toward life that makes everything else possible, and it's this. Decide to be the author, not the character. Most people live as characters in a story written by everyone else. They react to circumstances, they respond to demands. They are shaped by forces outside them. They wait for things to happen to them. They define themselves by what has happened to them. Authors make choices. Authors decide what the story means. Authors can write a scene where the character fails catastrophically and then decide what that failure is for. Authors can look at the most painful chapter of the narrative and say, this is not the end. This is the turn. This is the moment where everything changes. In 2026, stop being a character. Be the author. It doesn't mean you control everything. Authors can't control everything. The world is chaotic, random, sometimes cruel, sometimes unimaginably beautiful. Circumstances will happen that you didn't choose. People will disappoint you. Plans will fall apart. The path will not look like what you imagined, but you get to decide what it means. You get to decide what you do next. You get to decide who you are in response to what life brings. And that is the ultimate reset. Not changing your outer circumstances first, but taking back the authorship of your inner life, reclaiming the narrative, deciding with full consciousness, full intention, full love for yourself and your one wild and precious life, deciding who you are and where you're going. No one can take that from you. No one can take that from you. I want to close with something very simple. I want to talk about today, not 2026 as a whole, not the next 5 years, not the vision board, not the strategy, just today. Today is the only day you have. And I know we say that all the time and it's become a cliche, but I want you to actually feel it. The fact that you are breathing right now is a gift that was not guaranteed. This exact moment, this one, the one you're in right now, is the only moment you have access to. The past is a memory. The future is imagination. This is real. This is what you have. What are you going to do with it? Not in a panicked, anxious way. Not in a way that makes this moment feel insufficient. In a grateful, full, abundant way. In a way that honors what this moment is, an opportunity, a fresh start, a clean page. Because here's the beautiful thing about it. No matter what happened yesterday, no matter how many days you didn't show up for yourself, no matter how many years you spent in the wrong direction, no matter how many promises you made and broke, no matter how far the gap feels between who you are and who you want to be, today is new. Today has never happened before. And today, because you are here listening, feeling, choosing, today has the potential to be the day that everything changes. Not because of magic, because of a decision. The kind of decision that happens in the quiet of your own heart and then ripples out into every choice you make from this moment forward. You are enough. You have always been enough. Not as a destination. You have been enough all along. Even in your broken seasons, even in your worst moments, even when you couldn't see it. Your worthiness was never something you had to earn. And you are capable of more. More aliveness, more presence, more contribution, more love, more impact, more becoming. And those two things, your inherent enoughness and your capacity for more, are not in contradiction. They coexist beautifully. Knowing you are enough gives you the security to reach for more without desperation, without the need for anyone else's validation. You do it not to prove something. You do it because you can. Because the life that is waiting for you, the one you've glimpsed in your quietest, most honest moments, it's real. It's not a fantasy. It's a possibility that is connected through your choices to the present moment. And it is calling you. It has always been calling you. And I deeply, genuinely believe that part of why you are here today is because you are finally ready to answer. So answer. In 2026, answer. Reset your life not because the old one was a failure, but because you are ready for something more true, more alive, more fully yours. Not the life that fear chose for you, but the life that you, standing in your full power, standing in your full dignity, standing in full knowledge of your own capacity and your own worth, choose. That life. Go build that life. Go. The world is waiting for you. And more importantly, you are waiting for you. It's time. Thank you.